Hey, I'm Jeremy Johnson, SVP of Experience Transformation for Genient. Today we're going to talk about modern product discovery: when, where, why, and how much. I've had a career and the opportunity to work with lots of different types of products, lots of different types of groups of users and customers or employees. Or it was travel agents at GameStop, it was gamers. Back to from Sabre, came back through Travelocity. So instead of travel agents this time, it was travelers. And then in various consulting roles, everything from airlines to convenience stores to retail. So a wide variety of different experiences. Currently, I'm at Genient. We're an experience transformation consulting company trying to help Fortune 500 and well-funded startups create better experiences for their customers and employees. Wide range of services. In fact, we think of experiences as a very kind of holistic thing, driving the discovery, the insight, and then creating that experience, which we know today experiences flow through digital solutions, physical spaces, all the kind of people interactions, and then help with the technology to deploy that as well. Product UX and discovery is what we're going to talk about today. And in the beginning, Marty Kagan, obviously a fan. If you're in product, you've probably read a couple of these books. He said, hey, I wanted a term that conjured up a very different image in the minds of product managers and product teams. I wanted them to have an open mind to know what they can't know and admit what they don't know. I love that quote. That's where the term discovery came from, coined by Marty Kagan. And he goes on to say, there are any number of techniques used to help with discovery, and new ones emerge all the time. An MVP is a discovery technique, as is design thinking, customer development, jobs to be done. And you can see a timeline here for different, it's funny enough, like you think of service design, which still today is very popular. In fact, there's a big service design conference in Dallas this year. That was started way back in 1982, and then design thinking 87, jobs to be done, inmates aren't in the asylum, lean startup inspired, continuous discovery habits, a lot of great books. My career started right there around 2000, my UX career. And another one is, of course, the double diamond. And the double diamond seems to resonate pretty well with folks. Like, people always seem to really get it and understand it. Obviously, it's, hey, we need a great whatever that is, that product, that service, understand, figure out what those right challenges are, spend time in that problem space, and then of course concept, ideate, and then of course design, test to find that final solution. I always talk a lot about what's knowable. Is something capable of being known, right? Is it able to be determined? And I feel like discovery is the way to get you there. You know, what I have seen, of course, in my career is a lot of people skip the problem section. They would like to spend less time making sure they're understanding the right problems and more time ideating, because ideating is sometimes the fun part. But actually, a lot of the valuable part for your product or service is actually in that problem space, and we're going to talk about that. Also, obviously, AI is really big right now, and talking with clients, there's definitely a rush right now to ideate, and you'll hear, hey, the executive team needs to mention AI in an upcoming call. What if we added AI too? And then they're coming up with ways to sprinkle AI here or there, sometimes not really connecting it to a real problem, business problem or customer problem. In fact, there's been articles, the AI and everything era is here, and it's giving us a lot of stuff we don't need, which reminded me of a book. There's a great book called Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution, a handbook for entrepreneurs. And Steve Wozniak says it's a great book. But yeah, so I'm here to talk about there's a lot of different problems, and then you need to really figure out which are the right problems for your business or company to solve. And then there's lots of different solutions, and then you need to figure out that right solution. And I do feel like organizations often don't spend enough time in that problem space. So let's talk about that. When to initiate discovery processes to maximize impact and efficiency. Often in digital development, frameworks skip discovery in favor of adaptability. You have agile, you have safe agile. Safe does and has added things for user experience and discovery here and there. But really, it's more around getting something out to market quickly and testing it. And the reason is because they were like, the market conditions can change, which makes perfect sense, right? But often it ends up being, the customers didn't use what we made, let's make something different. But discovery really helps reduce the amount of adaptability needed over time. And adaptability obviously adds cost from a time perspective, but even like tech debt as an example into your product. And so if you do a proper discovery program early on and understand that problem space, that customer, that employee need, you're going to need less correction, right? So the correction needed without discovery is going to be much less than a correction needed potentially when discovery is done well. And you could only adapt so far. You're running fast in the wrong direction isn't helpful. I get asked sometimes, but Jeremy, how can you ever know if someone will use something without making it? And what if I told you that many failures are knowable? And a lot of times when we talk with customers, maybe they have a new idea or they have a new problem space they want to enter, and they're like, how can you interact with customers in a space that we're not in yet, but there are customers in that space, or there are people using other things to do that job today. And where do product teams often ask for discovery help? I feel like a lot of organizations, they often start with solving a specific need, right? Especially, I've done consumer, also done a lot in the B2B space. This is maybe more apparent in the B2B space, but they solve a problem for a customer. It's going great, right? But over time, process and scale removes that closeness. People leave the company, features are continually added. And then at some point, customers don't feel like they're being heard. And then competition enters the market, right? And then that's where they're like, like we need some discovery. And that's where we get called quite often. And so patterns I see is late to the game, right? Like they're starting to lose to competition or decline in revenue, right? So sales are going down. Again, if it's in the B2B space, maybe they're having a hard time selling because the product is dated, looks dated, missing features, visual design even, right, from a sales perspective. But often it's more feature functionality oriented, but you're starting to lose the competition or decline in revenue. And that's when you're like, let's get to know this customer and figure out exactly what they need. Another one is becoming disconnected with the customer base over time. Again, as things scale up, it just happens, right? The amount of time you spend with the customer sometimes decreases. We work with companies where sometimes their product teams aren't the customer, right? If you're in manufacturing or whatever product you're making, a lot of times that product is, you are not the user of that product. And we're at the beginning of the company or the product, you're probably spending lots of time. Over time, that just declines, seems just to be natural. Feature prioritization, both what to add and what to remove. This is where I think it's they come to us saying, hey, we have all these ideas. What are the right ideas? What is the next thing that we should be doing? What's the next thing to drive revenue? What's the next thing to help us hit our metrics? And discovery is amazing for feature prioritization. And then also product test and learn, which are good. My take on MVPs are, of course, if it has to do with kind of the scale, the adaptability or organization, the speed to release from the organization. But yeah, if you could launch something fairly quickly, if it's just a small feature or a small product, and this is some project that's not taking years, projects that are not taking many millions of dollars, yeah, get it out there, test and learn. Here's a photo of the Amazon team. They launched the new Palm Scan Pay thing recently, and you see a researcher right there, and the researcher has her script, and he's taking photos or video while she's using it, right? So they decided to take that feature and just launch it. Arguably, Amazon's a pretty effective group at getting features out of the marketplace, and that's the decision that they took. You're ahead of the game if you're thinking about new product services or service lines or what we call greenfield. And this is where we have customers, and a lot of entrepreneurs, of course, they start with one thing and do that one thing really well. And then, of course, it's what are other things that we can do adjacent. And yeah, this is where like real discovery, where you're going out in the field, following people around, understanding their world, and trying to find like all the openings and opportunities where your organization, brand, product, service can play a larger role. And then, of course, grow market share, revenue, etc. So yeah, just two quick examples, and I actually wanted to find examples that weren't digital. I spent a lot of my time in digital, and actually with Jeannie, I've been spending some time helping with discovery also in the physical space, which has been really interesting. But this is a case where Swiffer is a $2 billion brand, and it really actually came from greenfield discovery. And so they had folks going through people's homes. So if you're not familiar with kind of ethnographic qualitative research, like a lot of times, like a researcher will go out to someone's house or someone's place of work or whatever that thing is. And in this case, they were in homes watching folks, and they noticed that they would take paper towels and wrap it around their like mops to pick up fine grit. And that was the ideation, because there was some DIY thing out there of customers doing a thing. They took that back and they developed their own product to do that better. And now it's a $2 billion a year brand. Daisy is another one. I love this story where they had sour cream in their little containers, very popular brand. They had ethnographic researchers like having dinner with folks, and they noticed that things like tacos, as an example, were difficult when you're kind of spooning things out and it's messy, and they're like, couldn't sour cream maybe be more like a condiment to spray on? And so they prototyped a new way of packaging it so they could squirt sour cream onto the taco, released it, and the numbers came out, and it was great. Like, it didn't cannibalize, it actually grew a market share for sour cream. So these are qualitative research greenfield that actually created whole new like products or categories. And so the two best places to get the most from discovery is generating ideas from the user's world. And it's not asking them, it's not what would you want next? It's I've observed this in your world. This looks like it would fit well. Or validate ideation from stakeholder teams. Obviously, teams have lots of ideas. Maybe there's competitive reviews and what else is out there. That you could validate those. Lots of different ways to do that. There's a couple studies out there. One of them was 93% of researchers conduct research before anyone designs anything. And that's good, right? That's what you actually want. You want research and insights and understanding of customers and employees to drive whatever it is that you're designing or developing. And there's lots of good books on this. Another one is called Continuous Discovery Habits. It's no secret that engaging with customers helps you discover better opportunities to serve them. I think we all know this, but yeah, sometimes when you're in an office building, it's hard to get outside the walls. Yes, and a couple memes thrown in here. We're very customer centric. Be honest, I am being honest. When was the last time you talked to a customer? We don't. Thank you. And unfortunately, this does happen. We have, through consulting, I've definitely bumped into organizations that hadn't been super customer centric, and that's fine. And you could ramp up and become it fairly quickly. So where to focus efforts within the product lifecycle and alignment with business goals? So research has a bit of a branding problem because it sounds like a cost. And the idea is you really want to move it to a predictor of positive business outcomes. Really, that's what it should be, right? Like customer learning should equal some business metric. A little bit of a joke here. A while back, there were some stories around New York City had paid $4 million for a study if trash bins are better than leaving garbage on the street, was the joke. And so a little funny, but actually, yeah, because I saw this and I went a little deeper, and actually the mechanics of trash in New York is actually fairly complicated. Everything from like where the trash sits to the bins, how the bins fit in the trucks to everything else. And so it actually was a little bit of a problem that needed to be solved, and a bit of research would probably help push it in the right direction so they don't make a decision that actually negatively affects a fairly important thing within the city. But yeah, there was an article recently. It was 8 reasons UX research isn't giving you the ROI and what to do about it. And one thing is, I feel like asking your researcher, if you're on the product side, ask your researcher how a given research plan will contribute to the measurable goals until they can explain it well. Like that's a key thing. There's lots of things like make sure the metrics are tied to business cases or business goals, have baseline metrics, make sure the research incorporated into roadmap planning, right? There's lots of things that you could do to make sure that the research is more effective. Some researchers do come from a very deep ethnographic kind of research background. And so sometimes they're not as business attuned. That's not always the case. Obviously, lots of them are, but helping match that. And I think you can products, the center there that can potentially help match all those things and make sure that the discovery process is very effective and tied to business. How I see the world is you got product management, setting goals, probably down from the business. There's context and there's constraints, and that's a collaboration between the project management team and the user research team. But the user research team has all the methods and activities to help execute discovery. And so the idea is determine your goals, right? What are the goals? Are increasing revenue, driving efficiency, drive engagement, cost effective, maybe tracking NPS scores, whatnot, reduce errors, ease of onboarding, right? Whatever the metric is, like you have metrics for your products. And then think about the context and constraints. Is there a time to market constraint? Because research would be different if it's something you have to launch before a big trade show or something, right? Do you have access to the users? And this is one where I'll say typically you can somehow always get access to the users. Sometimes it's easier than other times. Do you have access to locations? What's the budget? What's the team skill level? What's the level of certainty that you have today? Has a team going to be involved? So these are all context and constraints that the user researcher needs to know. And then the idea is to build the plan, right, with the methods. And there are lots of methods. I think we all love frameworks. We all love methods, I think, whether we're in UX research or product. But yeah, so lots of methods out there. And the idea is that you could actually get them to build out what are the right methods to use. So typically it's a mix of qualitative and quantitative methods for the right scope. I obviously use both quite often. Qualitative, I feel sometimes underused and very powerful. This is why you need this discovery leader, right? So because there are so many places to apply discovery and so many ways to support your product goals. Are you in the ideation phase? Are you currently in development? Did you just launch something? Are you testing something, right? There's different methods and different activities that you would do at different scales at different points in time, like a product life cycle. And then also ask them to map out a plan. Because I've been in consulting for some time, typically we have to be very clear about what we're doing and how long it takes. I feel like sometimes individuals who have been in-house for their whole careers, maybe it's a little fuzzier, but yeah, I would suggest and I would push for folks to showcase what a timeline they think would be and what the activities and methods are that they will go along with that timeline. But at the end of the day, the discovery teams, they should be delivering insights that are tied directly to actions that drive better business metrics. So again, it's goals, context constraints, methods and activities. And then let's get that data through that research. Let's figure out what that story is, build that report, and let's have a plan of action, right? And at the end, research is nothing, strategy is nothing if you don't have a plan of action. That's the goal at the end. And it takes time. Discovery, especially again on the qualitative side, it is time consuming. And I know this is something that business people don't like to hear. Something takes time, like going out and sitting with folks and shadowing them for a couple of days. It's just time consuming, right? And so if you look at, if you're going to do 16 contextual inquiries, interviews, customer follow-alongs, that could take 112 to 144 hours to do something like that. And that's including the time to affinitize the data. Now, note on that, actually AI is becoming okay at affinitizing data. We'll talk more about that later. And there's a lot of, if you don't have a team or newer to this, there's a Service Design Doing has a great website where they actually kind of list out a lot of these methods, activities, and actually will tell you who's involved and like how long it takes. So why discovery methods are crucial for identifying user needs, mitigating risk, and driving key business metrics like revenue, margin, and new product innovation. And it's of course, it's like, what would you say you do here? And we want to turn that to shut up and take my money, right? If you're doing discovery, it should be tied and it should be driving business value. Now, when we talk about business value and design and research, there's a lot of studies out there. If you're trying to think about, what is a business case? Obviously, they're very specific business cases, and there's kind of more broad numbers out there. But as an example, McKinsey actually did the business value of design, and they have the inside track on lots of organizations, and they collected 2 million pieces of financial data, 100,000 design actions, and they performed better with revenue growth and higher returns to stakeholders. So groups that had more design activities, did more design activities, which includes discovery, did better. Revenues, return to shareholder beat out the benchmarks. There's a lot of studies in this area. This is one from IBM, talking about using design thinking, which includes discovery as well, but it mentioned the organizations / time required for initial design and alignment, and I would totally agree with that. I've seen that often. Project teams leverage better design, user understanding, reduce development and testing time. If you know what you're building, again, going back to the adaptability, so instead of having to rebuild it over and over again because it wasn't the right thing, you more likely are going to move in the right area. And of course, if everyone knows the direction they're going, they can just move faster and more effectively. And design defects cut in half, faster time to market. I totally agree. This is the new design frontier, and the design team has a proven an impact on, and this shows you the companies they're doing more versus the companies that are doing less on the design side are doing better on revenue, cost savings, time to market evaluation. There's a really old study that pretty much shows up in every deck about user experience or discovery, where Harvard Business Review took design-focused companies and pegged them against the S&P 500, and it did quite a bit better. And there's like a fun old story from, I've seen Jared Spool a number of times speak, and he's got this great story where he was working with a big box retailer, and there was a button, and it was like, the designers fixed the problem simply. They took away their register button, and it's like, this ended up being the number of customers purchasing went up by 45%. The extra purchases resulted in an extra 15 million for the first month, for the first year, sold additional 300. But it's sometimes very small things can have a large effect on it, and that's probably more of a usability thing than a discovery thing, but that would come out through discovery. So lots of great books that kind of talk about the same thing here. So how much investment is necessary to balance thorough research with agile development needs? Like, how much should you invest? Always a question, right? And you should have a strategy of some kind. And so here's a little kind of mini case study out there that's pretty wild. Discovery should be relative to scale and needed investment, the problem being solved. So I believe in that. Like if it's a small problem, or it's easy to launch, or the cost of potential failure is very low, very little to no discovery, right? But in this case, there was a brand that was looking to create and seed a mobile video platform with curated professional shows made specifically for mobile users. So in this case, an executive funded this company, and they wanted to create a way to not just view YouTube videos that are obviously very popular, but actually really good professional shows made specifically for mobile, and in some cases even filmed in portrait versus landscape, right? But to do that, right, one, they need tech platform, marketing to get people to use it, and very expensive content. And this is a true story. And so they spent $2 billion to get to launch. So this is a $2 billion product, and they did little to no discovery on this product, which stories came out later about this. Arguably, you would ask, what % are you willing to spend on discovery to help prove you have a viable product? Even if they just spent 2%, that would have been a lot of customer discovery, right? But even at 10% would have been a deal. And number of the articles watching the rise and fall of this company, Quibbly never ran an MVP or any kind of experimental public beta to test what kind of features resonated with their target users. They just had an assumption that people would like to watch short drama series episodes And when they had very few minutes to kill on their phone. The executive was sure and just went all in and launched it. And there's a fun site called Failure that talks about how startups fail, and unfortunately, a lot of them do. The joke there is I'm not sure if it's the user or the design. Doesn't necessarily matter. When you look at the website and they categorize things that have failed, the actual categories, and actually a number of these categories you could avoid with product discovery. Like it would reduce like the failure to pivot, lack of focus, lack of product market fit, no market needed, poor product, right? Like all these things could be fixed with product discovery. Product market fit, yeah, that's obviously a very big goal of most product individuals, or the goal of product individuals. It just means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy that market. But it is unfortunately a major reason why startups fail. Like why do most startups fail? Because there was no market needed is actually number two there. And so when you think of it as like a sliding scale with lower percentages as budgets grow, right? Let's say you had a $6 million investment with 3 product teams, $12 million investment with 6 product teams, and a $24 million investment with 12 product teams. Like how much would you spend on research? And it's really about reducing risk. And so spending 5 to 8%, 3 to 6%, 2 to 4%, sliding it down as the investment and the projects are bigger, like you can get some pretty good discovery done for these kind of numbers. And this is over a year as well, right? Depending on where you are in your product lifecycle, if you had 300K, either sometimes you might spend a lot up front to do a lot of upfront ramp up, and then you might get down the product line a little bit, and then you might do some usability testing, or you might be doing like some kind of continuous discovery. Lots of options there. And of course, again, if it only takes a small amount of time or investment, it's an MVP, build and launch, do that. Discovery helps improve your odds for success, and unfortunately, they're lower than people think they are. Microsoft mentioned that 1/3 of their ideas yield negative results. A streaming service Netflix believed that 90% of its ideas are wrong. Google reported that as much as 96% of their ideas to fail to generate revenue positive results. And travel site Booking.com, which is known for doing a lot of elaborate A/B testing, 9 out of 10 of their ideas failed to improve any metrics. So 9 out of 10 of the ideas that they launched didn't actually improve the metric they wanted it to. So you need to ask yourself, like, what percentage is it worth to mitigate the risk? And have you invested the right amount into the problem space in really getting to know your customers? Joke on personas here. I do personas. I definitely like more experienced personas that go a little bit deeper than just their basic demographics, obviously. But this is an example of sometimes the customer, in this case, they have very similar demographics there, but are probably wildly different. And if you didn't have discovery, you wouldn't figure that out. So how many people? I like, to me, a best practice kind of team ratios. You got that product owner, probably got 2 or 3 UX designers, probably got 5 to 8 developers, got a couple researchers in there. So I know sometimes research is like a separate thing and it's like a shared resource. The idea is that researcher or the discovery person is really kind of leading, shepherding, spearheading, like they're taking insights and converting them into actionable strategy. And so it's really about leading, right? And I say leading, being user-centric, customer-centric, employee-centric, depending on if you're doing customer-facing tools or employee-facing tools, right? It's everyone's responsibility. Like shouldn't be a siloed function, right? These teams should be sharing widely. They need to have good storytelling skills. Researchers actually are fairly in demand. There's a lot of job postings out there from very large, well-known companies. And just generally, as you start this process and you do this kind of continuous discovery, right? Like your knowledge increases over time. And I saw this. If you're working with a UX designer and notice they're looking a bit sad, honestly, try one of these examples and you'll see them happy in seconds. As a UX designer, I run UX design teams. Sure, like we definitely have budget for testing throughout the project. Would love that. If you say we need the UX research, let's do it. I know I am not the user, which again, a lot of times business folks have not been the user of the product. And the way you prioritize user feedback is exactly what we need. So these are things that your user experience or research team would love to hear from a product owner perspective. How much time? The idea is insights can get old, so you don't want to get into a delta. It is better to do continuous research versus doing a big effort and then really not doing anything for quite some time. Again, that chart of knowing the customer and then eventually falling out from knowing them well. Jared Spool, again, has a thing called exposure hours. He's the closest thing I've ever found to a silver bullet when it comes to reliably improving the product and experience that organizations produce is how often the teams are interacting with people using the products. And like Intuit's a big one on this. And as an example, there's a famous story where they took all their internal team members, put them on buses and bust them out to sit next to tax prep individuals to get really close to that end customer for them or end user for them. If you think about it, like Nielsen Norman has suggested annual goals for personal user exposure hours, which I like this concept for different classes of personnel. For a company or group, you would add up the hours your staff to come to an appropriate overall user exposure goal. But so if you're a product person with your team, maybe you set a user exposure goal. But yeah, in a year, I mean, they're saying it should be between 500 and 1,000-ish hours, which is, again, is probably not wrong. Again, Jared Spool says that's the closest thing he's seen to a silver bullet for great products out there. Should go beyond, and this is good to look at, talking to users or interviewing them. Obviously that's great, but that's not actually seeing them use the product. Focus groups, groupthink, surveys, using the product yourself. Again, you may not be an average user, reading a report, right? There are things that are good and add to it, but these aren't like the exposure hours, and they should go beyond this. I used to call it a Simba test because I'm like, oh, like how does your team fare in getting closer to user tools? And it's if you were trying to figure out about lions, right? You could read the report, you could see the interview videos, you've been a part of a focus group, you've been in some usability sessions, and I've observed them in context. Observing in context is definitely where you'll probably learn the most. And then on researchers generally, they were talking about timeframes to complete projects recently, so user research teams, and most reported their projects taking weeks, with a third reporting months. The number of days was around 42 days, so definitely a lot of folks are doing shorter user discovery research type activities. And then when asked about a recent project, 63% of them said they had just enough time, 22% they had not enough, and 14% said they had more than enough. Time is always a challenge. And again, some of the activities are just time consuming. And when you ask what they wanted time for, it's interesting. It was really the analysis was the big part, right? Because when you're gathering lots of data, especially qualitative data, it just takes a while to go through it. But also they didn't think they had enough time for recruitment, to deliver the results, for the field work. And they need to be great at storytelling. There's actually a lot of articles and stories about discovery folks and researchers getting much better at telling that story to the product and business teams. And the story needs to have a bias for action, including a plan to move forward. So again, getting the data from the user researcher, build out that story based on data, and that's going to be that collaboration between the product manager and your experienced researcher. Figure out what those actions are tied to the business metrics, and then plan of action to move forward. You're often not your users. In consulting, I've seen this time and time again. Sometimes people are very aware of it. Sometimes they're not so as aware of it. But remember to walk a mile in their shoes. And one more joke here, that a different angle or different view or coming in with open eyes is sometimes a good thing, but walking a mile in their shoes is definitely important. So at last, what can we do more today with AI? Yet research does have a lot of unstructured data, and that is an area that AI is continually getting better in. And so actually this was a real project that I was on, and there were like thousands of mixed method data points. So we got some stuff from surveys, some stuff from interviews, some stuff from observations. And then this project was actually a bit before AI could have probably helped us. And it was an affinity diagram by hand, right? And it took quite some time to go through. But arguably, I would say the team, including myself, that went through this, knew it really well, right? When you're affinitizing and putting all these things together, oh, we had 5 or 6 users or customers like have this same problem, right? Like it really brings it to life. So getting into the data does help, but of course, if you're in a team where your day job is very busy doing something else, and so they're affinitizing it, then they could bring this out in from a story perspective. Yeah. There was a quote from Kelly, who's a coworker of mine at Genient. She mentioned the general consensus among practitioners that AI can be a useful assistant, but you should keep an eye on the work and check it. You don't let the intern deliver work without checking it first. And so it does invent data, even when given real data. This is an example where there was data given to it, and it was just like hallucinating and trying to be helpful and create fake data about user needs or the user persona. So things obviously you don't want, obviously also getting better at that. AI hallucinations are incorrect or misleading results, or if you're not familiar, it's when it generates something on its own. It has decided to come up with something that you didn't give it or ask for, or thinks it's being more helpful if it creates this scenario. That does happen. There are starting to be more tools out there, especially again around that affinitizing all that data, things like, so yeah, lots of different products and tools out there that are doing some pretty great things around data collection, things around desk research and creating synthetic data. So more and more tools are coming out there, and I think these will get better as time goes on. And even down to sharing the research, which is an important part, like making sure the whole team is aware of the research and really building that empathy within the group. And there's Nielsen Norman did a post not that long ago talking about the AI powered tools for UX research. But yeah, that's hit on when, where, why, and how much. And hopefully you get a little more knowledge on product discovery, why it's important, and why you should go forward and help reduce that risk and make great products that people love.